The weekend of the Game Jam had finally arrived. This year's theme was, "Hey wait, come back!" And so the brainstorming began. The idea that stuck was a top-down shooter between an infected enemy and the main player. Neutral blobs would be attracted to the main enemy blob. They become infected and try to kill you. Due to our busy schedules, I only had a day and a half, while my sister only had the last day to work on art, so we were feeling nervous to say the least. So I got started with some basic top-down shooter mechanics. This included player movement, enemy chasing movement, and a shooting mechanic. I also created a safety zone above the infected area. Here you would be able to replenish health and reload up to 10 ammo. I implemented random spawning for the blobs. I also randomized the blobs if the player was in the safety zone. As Nadisha finished the artwork, I slowly started putting them into the scene. I did some last-minute animation, put in the title screen, and built the game. So the built version was missing some sprites, but I fixed what I could and submitted. Man, that weekend was hectic, and sadly we weren't able to have a completed game done. I didn't let it get to me since I went in with an open mind to learn something new, and that really helped. This was the first time making a top-down shooter, and it was really interesting implementing all sorts of different mechanics. I definitely overscoped for the time we had, maybe because I don't really play those games, and I didn't really take the time at the beginning of the jam to organize my ideas. But hey, it was a cool idea, so I decided to take it a bit further and at least try to have a workable version of the game by giving myself a couple more days to work on it. The first step post-jam was to redefine the scope of the main game. I definitely wanted this to be a survival game, so I decided on 3 waves of enemies, each introducing a new type, and one last boss battle to finish the game. During the game jam, the original plan was to pick up neutral blobs from the infected area and bring them back to the safety zone. However, that seemed like way too much back and forth and kind of disturbed the flow of the game. So now you would just have to collect the neutral blobs to end the wave of enemies. Recently, I've been trying to learn more digital art, so I started learning Adobe Illustrator. I created 2 new enemy types in the style that my sister made the first one, and it was a lot of fun. I feel like I still struggle with choosing colors, but hopefully I'll get used to it with more practice. The enemies in the game were now the infected, the chaser, and the spitter, totally not inspired by another game. These enemies generally behave the same way. They spawn, hurt the main player if they are infected, and move towards the enemy blob if they are neutral. This was a perfect opportunity to do some good code design and use inheritance. No, not that type of inheritance. I haven't used it before in game development, so I was really curious to give it a try. So I derived the Spitters class from the regular enemies class. Now the Spitter would behave the same way, but I would also be able to give it its own unique attack behavior. This minimizes a bunch of code, and also makes it easier to add new types of enemies. Finally, I made the boss enemy that you would have to defeat to win the game. The main menu we had in the Game Jam version was super static, and that's something we usually don't like. It needed more life to it, and by that I mean more animations. With a couple of them in place, the main menu looked a lot better. I tossed in a little transition, and Nadisha finished a how to play graphic. The thing I was most sad about in the Game Jam version was the lack of music and sound effects. I really love the way sound can enhance an experience. So I found some fitting music and even made a couple of sound effects myself, one being super obvious. As usual, there were a couple of things I struggled on implementing. I couldn't get knockback to work nicely, but I was also kinda lazy to perfect it, so that didn't help. I also didn't really like how the enemies could overlap each other when they try to chase you. I think I read about a concept called flocking, and I probably should have implemented that. The game is also pretty hard in my opinion, and I think it needs a lot of balancing. That probably comes with playtesting and iterative work, so I left it in its current state. I was also happy that we had more of a replayable game compared to our last two jams. This game also requires you to think a bit in the way that you pick up blobs and shoot the enemies, and time the way that you get the ammo and health, so overall I'm pretty happy with how it came out. This game jam was truly a blast even though it didn't go as planned. I find shorter jams to be a bit intimidating, but this was going to be a historical event, so I knew I had to be part of it. The Blobs of the Jungle probably would have been better for a week-long game jam, and it's still not really that polished. It's a pretty difficult game, but I'd love if you could give it a try and let me know if you survived. If you guys like devlogs like this, leave a thumbs up, a comment, and hit that subscribe button. Bye!